Now, up until 1980, 1981, all special effects used classic animation tricks that were developed by animation companies. Disney developed a lot of them. And there are basically two ways of shooting animation, more or less. And one is what's called toplit, and the other is called backlit. And toplit is basically you've got a camera, and a classic animation camera is what's called a down shooter. It's a camera mounted on a rack that can go up and down, a bit like an enlarger can. And the camera shoots down onto a table, and you have pin registered animation cells. You see these little holes here? These are pin registrations, and that's a standard registration for animation. Here's an animation peg with the 3 pins in it, and that is taped down onto a platen, and then each cell that is punched is laid on top of that, so they are all in registered. You move one cell from one cell, you take a picture of it, you take the cell off, you take another animation cell and put it on, and it's in exactly the same place. So classic animation would use what's called top lit, where you have the camera pointing down, and then you have 2 lights either side of the artwork pointing down onto some artwork, and you have 2 lights either side illuminating the artwork, and the camera would just take a picture of it. And then it would advance 1 frame, and you move that cell off and take the next one in sequence, put it down, click, and you go like that, and you gradually get your animation. And then special effects techniques using a light box. And I've got a light box here. Let me kick it open. It's probably making me look a bit sort of Halloween-y. But a light box, here we go, was used, and you would put, say, a piece of film like this, Back to the Future, onto the light box. Like that, okay? And it would be pin registered the same way. And then a camera with color film would shoot this piece of artwork with a color filter, because it's only black and white artwork, so why would you use color? Well, this is going to be color at one point, and you put a color filter on the lens of the camera, so whatever color you want this part of the artwork to be, then that's what it'll be with that color filter on the camera. So it might be yellow or green or purple or blue or whatever. And then you would change various elements and add them together, wind the camera back and add them together to finally get a piece of artwork like this on film. Now, it's a very expensive process because you need a down shooter camera and all the filters and all the electrics, and you know, it's quite an investment. But what I did is, after working on Star Trek and learning about these advanced animation and special effects techniques, I was able to develop a system. Ooh, out of focus. Come on, camera. Get it together. Is it focusing? There we go. Nope. Oh, camera. Focus. There we go. And I thought, well, wait a minute. If you can use an animation camera to create artwork, which I did for Terminator 2. So we had all the different black and white elements, and we shot them using different filters, and oh, you know, you'd have to test and test and test, and send the film to the lab, and you get it the next day, and then look through all the exposures and think, okay, and the colors, and go, okay, we'll pick that color and that exposure for that element. And I think the Terminator 2 title had about 14 or 16 elements in it. So it's a very complex process, which computers now, obviate completely. But that's the way everything was done up until, in fact, just after Star Trek came out. But I thought, well, wait a minute. Okay, if that can work on a light box, what if I just turn the process around? And I had a color enlarger that had dichroic filter, so you could dial in any color you wanted. And it would project colored light down onto a table with the animation pins taped onto the table. And then I could make elements like this mat, and I could put color paper, Cibachrome paper, which is a very, very high quality color paper that you can develop at home quite easily. It's a very simple kit. You get a long tube with snap-in ends, and you can pour chemicals into it, and you put it in a little thing that rolls back and forth and rolls back and forth, and you can develop everything in the kitchen, basically. You have to do it when you're exposing the film or the paper, you have to do it in complete darkness, which makes it a bit difficult, but it's pretty easy to get used to. And so what I was able to do, this is a Cibachrome print, and if you see, you can see how this fits, sort of. Where are we? There. And what I would do is expose the various elements of the title, because you can see there's an outline of the lettering, a bit like, well, here, I've got it, in fact. So there's the mat for the outline. And so with the outline, since the outline is a blue, I would put the outline down and use blue light onto the and expose the color paper to blue light, and then that bit of color paper would come out blue, and everything else would be unexposed at that time. And then I would take that mat off and then put the mat in for this bit. And this is a bit trickier. I actually had to paint some color on a clear cell over the top to make this airbrush color. But and then I would expose that, and then put that in the developer and take it out, and I would have my title. But what that enabled me to do is it enabled me to create artwork like this, for instance, that you couldn't do any other way. And this is the Letraset logo. But I could make it any color. So, I mean, this I made look like gold. I could make it look like glass. I could make it look like chrome. I could make it red, blue. I could make it different colors of the rainbow. And it allowed me to produce lots of logos and film titles quite inexpensively, because I wasn't using horrendously expensive equipment that you pay by the hour, and the operator and everything, and it costs a lot of money. And here I've got where is it? New Line Cinema somewhere. And the wrinkle on this is, here are some tests I made for New Line Cinema, and that was the company that did Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings. They were the last people he went to, and they said, "Oh, this looks like we might be a runner," and they went with it. But so I was doing some testing for this, and you can see. Well, it might not show up on the video. These exposures and the colors are just slightly different. But what I did, oh, I have to get the light box out again. What I did And I learned this from one of the guys who worked on Star Trek, John Millerberg, is taking one of those mats. So this is the outline mat of New Line Cinema. And then what I did is I would put an airbrush sheet over it, a frosted piece of acetate, and I would airbrush all the tones. That then gave these tones to make it look, you know, like light was hitting it off different corners and everything. And so this was a plain mat like this one that I then just place the frosted acetate over, and let me turn the light box off and you can see the frosted acetate. And then I would just airbrush with black ink all the tones on the bevels on the letters, and it was really easy to do because I didn't have to mask anything off. I could just hit a corner, take a little piece of plastic film and lay it over, say, the top part of that A, and then spray down along the A, and I didn't have to mask anything because it was black film everywhere else. So it was really, it was very easy to do, and the results were really incredible, and it allowed me to, like I say, do a lot of film titles and also do a lot of logos during the 80s. Very inexpensively, that as computers were coming along, people just couldn't compete with on price and everything. And I still had that ability to change colors just by changing the colored light that came down. But then, you know, once computers were really motoring along by the 90s, then film was out the window. And but I learned all that from working on the special effects on Star Trek, and also watching how they shot the models and everything and the techniques they used, which was basically like a toplit camera, only it was horizontal. The camera was on a little truck that was on rails, and it had stepper motors that would move the camera forward one little bit at a time, take an exposure, move it forward again, take another exposure as it went towards the model. But you could, it's just the same concept of a vertical downshooter camera, except it was just horizontal. So that's how effects are done in film up until computers came along. And basically, you know, most of these techniques, except the backlit technique, I think backlit came in probably in the 60s or 70s, but the general idea of creating motion and effects and dropping backgrounds out and putting different backgrounds in was really developed in the 20s and the 30s. And like a lot of the cameras that we use, like a Pacific Title, were cameras that were built in 1935. And they worked just fine, you know, in 1980. So, there we go. In 1990 even. And now Pacific Title and companies like that have all gone, because there's no need for film anymore. So it's sad in a way, because it was all hands-on, using really neat equipment, and it was all physical, you know, with the sprockets and gears and stepper motors and lenses, and computers kind of have taken the fun out of it. Anyway, thank you.